I'm going to talk now about the made end paper. The made end paper is when you have a piece of marble paper, which, as you see on the back, is probably rather messy because of the hand marbling, and also old paper was not very strong. It's going to have a piece of paper backed onto it, like that, a white sheet, and then it will have another white sheet on the back, and some of this will come round to make the waste sheet on the outside. I'll just go through all that, but I'll just show you what I've got ready in advance. 2 sheets folded, that is, of marble paper, one for each end, and then 4 pieces of white paper folded in half of the same sort of size. They should be slightly bigger than the book you're working on, because by the time you've finished all the folding and gluing, it will all be all over the place, so you need to allow for that. I will back this onto another piece of paper, and then the sheet will go round the outside like that, and that will be the waste sheet, which will disappear. So it doesn't matter if one of the folds, or even 2, have a piece of rough paper, which will be the waste sheet and which will be torn off. You can use absolutely anything for this. In fact, I'll do it now. I'll just put a bit of paste along the outside here and just attach the flap like that. So that is now the waste sheet in position, and it's just making a fold, but it will disappear when the time comes. So that's all the pieces ready, and I'm just going to take 2 of them. I'll put those side pieces aside for the moment. I'm going to take a piece of marble paper and a piece of plain white paper, and what I'm going to do is to paste both sides, to paste the marble and the white sheet. With the glued version, you can do a quick version of this with PVA. What tends to happen is that the side that you've glued gets curled inwards, and it tends to make the end paper not absolutely flat. If you paste both sides, you will find that both sides do come out flat, and it's a bit more satisfactory if you have the time to do it. And I'm going to dry them in between some waste non-stick paper, silicone release paper, and some boards, and I'm going to put them in between those 2 lots of board and release paper, and give them a quick press, let them dry, and then, while I'm doing the other one, and then let them dry, and then give them another press. So to begin with, I'm going to paste a bit of the one side of the marble paper. Just move it along a little bit. Leave it a good couple of minutes to let the paper stretch, because one of the problems about this kind of thing is the stretching of the paper. You can see it curling already, and I'm just going to wait till it's flattened out and it's stopped curling. So I'm going to do the same thing on here. And the point about the paste is that it's slower drying than the PVA, and so it penetrates the paper, stretches it out without drying off too much. So I'm just going to allow that to dry. Do make sure that the paste is even. An awful lot of problems are caused on end papers by the pasting being uneven, because say you miss a bit in the middle, if it doesn't stretch out properly, I think I missed a little bit there, if it doesn't stretch out properly, if it can't stretch because it's not wet, then it will be restricted in the middle, and you will get a wrinkling which you can never get rid of by pressing. General wrinkling you can, they'll look fairly wrinkled when I've taken them off here. In fact, I'm going to take them off this waste sheet and put them on a clean piece so that I don't get the paste in the wrong places. And I'm just going to leave that a little while longer, and just make sure again that it doesn't dry out as well. It's quite easy for the paste to dry out rather if it's a warm atmosphere. So just make sure it is evenly spread, and that the edges aren't holding it, restricting it, holding it back in any way. I think that's probably all right. So I'm now going to lift this up in the way that I think I've showed you before, which is fingers holding the paper here, your thumb controlling the back of the paper with your fourth finger, and position it on the fold. The white is a little bit larger than the marble, that doesn't matter, we're going to trim it down. And you notice I'm keeping the dry bits away from the damp bits. If you put the dry piece on the damp sheet, it will stretch it, it will start to get damp and to stretch out, and I don't want that to happen. Just make sure that it's flat down, a very light bone, and then I'm going to put it between these bit of grey board and some silicone release paper and another piece of release paper on the top, another bit of grey board, and then those grey boards can go in between these pressing boards. And I'll give it a quick nip in my nipping press. You will see that I've got the boards as centred as I can. You want to have your screw coming down absolutely centrally. I've left the dry pieces sticking out, and I'm going to bring it down just until I feel the resistance, which is about there. And I'm going to give it a very slight turn more, but I'm not going to press it too much. If I press it too much, I will find that the paste will come through the paper, and that's not desirable. So while that's pressing, I'm going to glue the other piece, and it's exactly the same. Paste rather. This is distinctly paste as opposed to PVA. I have shown you or I will show you, it's on the video somewhere, the method with PVA where you do the same kind of thing but just on one side very quickly and bone it really hard. As I said, the problem is that you get the stretching of the paper, which is not, well, it always causes problems of cockling and wrinkling of one sort or another, and I find that to paste both sides really gets rid of that. If you paste just one and you then put the dry sheet onto the pasted piece, you do find that it wrinkles and you have to keep lifting and stretching it, and I find it's much easier to simply paste both, and then they're both well stretched when you come to put them together, and you just don't have that problem of the wrinkling, and I find it seems to work much better. So I'll just leave those a moment, and in fact I think that's probably all right. I shall now start to just move them up a little. In fact, I'll move them both out of the way. Just remove the end paper, this paper one. Make sure that's, it does, as you see, it tends to sort of cockle up and turn over, so you need to make sure it doesn't turn right over itself. So I'll do it the other way around this time. Same thing applies, so keep the dry sheet out of the way and position it onto the folds, and then just flip it back and give it a light press over. I'm now going to go and remove the other one from the press. And you will see that the damp part has been pressed down quite firmly, and I'm now going to just leave that to dry in the air for a short while as I press this other pair. So I'm going to put this into the same sandwich that I had prepared for the first one. So it's release paper either side. The board, the rough board, the grey board, helps to absorb some of the moisture, so it's quite a good idea to put it there. It's not essential, but I think if you have the hard laminate board directly on the paper, it doesn't absorb quite so easily. So I'm going to put this back in the press, and then when the other end paper has had at least probably a couple of minutes, I'll probably put this back in the press and give it one more pressing. and then when it's ready, or rather when it's had a second pressing, I'll simply leave it to dry in the air. It will be cockled all over the place, but it won't matter because we'll just put it in the press and then it will be ready for use. And no, I think I'll show you that when it's dry. Actually, I will let this dry and then show you how to put the waste sheet on. I'm going to fast forward a bit now, and although this isn't entirely dry, I'm going to treat it as if it was. We've got the outer, that'll be the board paper, and we've now got the inner page lined, and it's not pressed yet, so it's not as flat as it will be, and the final sheet here. So I'm just going to turn it over, and I'm going to tip the second sheet onto it. So I've got a plain sheet of paper. Forget that. So I've put the white sheet I'm going to tip onto the outside, and note that it is onto the white sheet. So you've got all the white sheets on one side. It's not the other side of the end paper. So you'd still want this board paper absolutely free. So I'm just going to put this on here. In fact, for the sake of speed, I'm going to use PVA. So I'm just going to use a small brush, PVA, and I'm going to mask the rest of the white paper so it doesn't get in a mess, and that we have a nice consistent line. So I'm just going to put a bit of adhesive along here. I'm only using PVA because I want it to dry fairly quickly, so I can show you how to fold it back. Of that, and just lift this up and turn it round and pitch it back onto the fold, so that you now have 4 layers of white paper, 2 folds, so that you've got your board paper here on the right on the outside, your made sheet, the marble paper backed with white, you've got the other half of that, and now glued onto that and almost dry is yet another fold. And when this is finished, this outer white sheet goes round to protect the board paper from all the hammering, banging, gluing and so on that's going to happen to the book in the course of the forwarding. So this is simply to protect that and will eventually be torn out. You will see that in the process later on. But I'm now going to allow that, I'm going to fold this back for the moment, allow the made sheet to dry properly, and then I will give it a good firm press and it will be flat and usable. When you stitch it on, by the way, you will stitch it on through the white sheets. The construction means that you have, get it right way now, there's your, go around the other way, there's your board paper on the outside, this will be the back of the book, and your stitching will go through there, so that your stitching, if you ignore the marble paper, the stitching will go through the 2 white sheets, it will go down the middle, and the stitching won't touch the marble paper at all. You'll see that when we come to do the stitching on of the end papers.